The portal is closing today, and Georgia Tech still hadn't taken a quarterback.
You are Locked On Georgia Tech, your daily podcast on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. I am one of your hosts, Caleb Johnson. I wasn't smart enough to get into Georgia Tech, but I'm plenty smart enough to talk Georgia Tech sports. Taking this daily journey with me, covering the Yellow Jackets, is my co-host, Jarvis Davis, who's been covering Atlanta sports for the last 15 years. We want to start off by saying thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We're free and available wherever you download your podcasts and wherever you go to download them. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. Today on the show, we will get into how did the Jackets do in the transfer portal so far? Does Jason Semore have what he needs to make a significant jump? But first, Jarvis, we spent so much time before the transfer portal opened, when the transfer portal opened, throughout this 2-week stretch of the transfer portal being open, talking about the quarterback position, because the minute that we learned that Aaron Philo was out the door, headed to Florida with Buster Faulkner, this was something that I guess you needed to have been prepared for, but certainly it didn't feel like Georgia Tech was at the time. Obviously, that's before George Godsey gets hired. Then he comes in, and you're okay. So now we need to start to figure out what this quarterback position is going to look like. We had discussions of, okay, looking at the quarterbacks you have on this roster, could you just stick with who you've got, or do you need to go into the portal? And it certainly has felt like Georgia Tech needed to go in the portal for a quarterback, and that they felt that as well, based on the number of guys that they had on visits and that they were linked to. And yet we sit here on January 16th, Jarvis, and Georgia Tech has not taken a quarterback out of the transfer portal. I will ask you this. Has Chris Weinke failed because he didn't get a transfer portal quarterback?
Ooh, that's pretty harsh. The way it's framed, I have to say no.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. Chris Weinke understands who's on his roster, right, at this moment. Chris Weinke is probably understands what he has on his roster. And I think that when you look at the type of quarterback that Tech was reportedly interested in, those guys weren't necessarily guys that you could say, yep, I know he's going to be the starter. Just like when Justice Haynes was committed, everybody in the moment know he's going to be the starting quarterback, the starting running back. And Malachi Holmes is going to be a really, really good backup, and they're going to be a nice tandem they're going to have in this offense. So I'm not necessarily surprised that they haven't signed anyone. I mean, now the portal is closing, meaning people that can enter the portal. But, and you can still sign guys out of the portal. However, when you're talking about a premium position, you might as well keep what you got if you ain't signed one.
Yeah.
So I answered the question and say, I don't think Weinke has failed in this period from getting a quarterback out of the portal because of what I think he feels he has and the confidence he has in his capabilities to coach these guys up and get these guys, whoever it is, whether it be Graham Knowles, Grady Adamson, Cole Bergeron, whoever, he feels like he has enough talent on this in that quarterback room to put those guys out there and let's see what rises to the top.
Yeah, we don't know yet, obviously, whether or not he's failed. I just think it's the idea of getting to August, and if when we see whoever ultimately gets picked to be the starting quarterback, and if they look unprepared or not ready for the big moment, in need of more development, that's when I would look back on and say, okay, Chris Weinke failed by not getting someone out of the transfer portal back in January. Just for the simple fact of, look, we had this discussion talking about the guys on this roster. And yes, I know, like, we left one guy out of that discussion, and maybe unfairly so when it came to Grady Adamson. But I think there was something to the effect of he was someone kind of underrated coming out of high school, also joined Georgia Tech late and didn't get to camp until after spring in June. And then you're competing against a guy in Graham Knowles who was on campus and got to go through spring and learn everything longer than you did. And then you're also dealing with Cole Bergeron coming in, being a 4-star recruit. So more highly recruited and sought after. When you're competing against those two things, guys who's been on campus longer, guy who was more highly sought after than you are, yeah, that's going to slide you down further on the pecking order, to say, and makes it to be a conversation of, like, ultimately maybe it is a guy like Adamson who comes out of this whole group as the starter. But it just feels like right now you're dealing with the likes of Graham Knowles and Cole Bergeron. Either way, it's a full-on competition. I would push back on one thing that you said, though, Jarvis. And this is the only thing of the quarterbacks that they were after not being like surefire starters, like bringing in a Pribula, bringing in a Jake Merklinger, bringing in a Colton Joseph and Anthony Calandria, like paying for those guys in the transfer portal, I think is what sets the difference of, okay, no, that is a guy who is going to be the front runner. Doesn't mean you don't get through camp and go like, oh, actually, this guy that we have in-house is more talented. But I think because the quarterback position is so vital for Georgia Tech and just for every football program, like look at the difference that the 2025 season was because of Haynes King. You and I talked about the number of games that Haynes literally won for this team. So it's clearly a very important position. And I just think if obviously they're you know, Brent Key and George Godsey is having to evaluate, and Chris Weinke, they're having to evaluate, is the money that we're going to spend going to be worth it if we're bringing one of these transfer portal quarterbacks in? And either they didn't feel that was the case, or it was, hey, you know, they just didn't sell the players on the program enough to get the guys in there. It was one way or the other.
And I think that, you know, as far as the whole starting quarterback piece, I just don't think those guys are that good. That's my humble opinion. Looking at those guys, Calandria, nothing really stands out to me. I mean, he's had success, right? He has games under his belt. I get that. You would have to pay for his services, and he would have been the starter because of you have to pay for his services, and he's been a starter played in the college football world. I just wasn't impressed by those guys. So that's why I said, yeah, you know, they would have been your starter. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying that I think ultimately when you look at the caliber of talent of those guys that you just mentioned, it's so close to me that you have an open competition. I'd rather you have your guys that you on the roster who you recruited to come in because you thought they can be potentially be a starter. So have those guys battle it out. All of them. Cole, Graham, Grady, You know, all those guys, get all those guys in there and throw them in a pot and see who comes out. Because ultimately, the way I think you're going to be able to run the football, it's probably not going to really matter who's at that quarterback spot. All those guys got to be able to do is throw against man coverage. And like I said, we don't know who they're throwing it to right now. But he's just saying it's going to be a lot easier for whoever is in that starting quarterback spot once things get going.
Here's the last thing that I'll mention, and this is from a Chris Weinke press conference back in the month of June of 2025, where Chris said, I'm still a relationship guy. I want to build a good relationship. I want those guys to understand I care about them, that I'm here for them, and I truly believe if they know that they care about you, they're going to work harder. And he was specifically talking about Grady Adamson as one of those guys who's very athletic, really smart, starts with toughness. But I think the relationship aspect of this does play a factor. We've talked about whether or not the relationship aspect for Brent Key hiring coaches is maybe a little bit too much of a factor. Only time's going to tell, because it's going to be how good this offense looks under George Godsey. But then for Chris Weinke okay, maybe you weren't able to build those relationships with the guys that you looked at in the transfer portal that you had obviously scouted previous to them coming into college. Maybe you feel more confident about the relationships that you've built with the guys in this program. And it's going to see. It seems like this idea of this is going to be a development year for the quarterback position for Georgia Tech. And clearly, at least as of right now, January 16th, it does not mean that a quarterback can't come in here. But as Jarvis mentioned, the best are already gone. Like that, there is no denying that. The best are already off the board. And so at this point, it does feel like, hey, maybe you just stick with who you've got. All right, let's switch from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball. Does Jason Semore have what he needs to make a significant jump in the ACC defensively? The college football playoff is here. The national championship just right around the corner, guys. And FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, the college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what you get to love about it. You get to use profit boost on bets you already feel good about. So if you feel strongly that Indiana's been the best team in college football all season and that's going to continue on, maybe use your profit boost on that side. Or if you see the upset, you think the underdog and Carson Beck and Miami are going to be the ones to pull things out, you can go with your gut and how you feel on that. You can build a parlay around players and moments that you think are going to decide the game. Then you use the profit boost to go after even bigger winnings. So FanDuel is the best place to get on the action all playoff long. Visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. You already live your team every day, and I'll take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Georgia Tech with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedongeorgiatech.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Jarvis, as Jason Semore has now stepped in, officially gotten the title of defensive coordinator. He's been a little bit a part of this back end of getting guys from the transfer portal into this program. But in a large part, he's been handed a lot of tools as he steps into this program to be able to carry into this upcoming season. And so do you feel like Jason Semore has the talent, has the tools to make a significant jump for this Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets defense in the ACC this upcoming year?
From a body standpoint, I think you can, right? Because when you think about all the guys that walk out of that door and the defensive tackle spot, Jason Moore, Kilo Stone, Jordan Vandenberg, It's just Matthew Alexander, just so many guys that gave you significant snaps last year and gone. And so just from a body perspective, I feel like you have a guy like Tim Griffin, who we talked about, out of Alcovey High School, right up the street from me. So just big guy, big 6'5", 270, just going to play inside and outside. And when you think about guys like that, I hear versatility. I know it's a buzzword nowadays when you hear certain defensive coordinators talk about it, but it means something when those guys can be productive for you. Now, you didn't get that much playing time, if at all, at Cincinnati. He has 4 years of eligibility left. But guys like that who you can bring in, you have a plan for them. That's one of the reasons why he said he chose Georgia Tech, because of the plan that they have for him. They laid it all out, and they were very honest. And I'm sure they said, hey, man, you got something to prove. We want you. We like you. But you got to come in and prove it to earn your spot, because there's nothing going to be given to you, because they're loaded. They got a lot of guys up front, that they brought in from the Noah Carters of the world, so those are some of the Jordan Walker, like all those guys are going to play up front. And when you think about bringing so many guys who have talent, it's just for whatever reason, they hopped in the portal. Some they didn't play. Some they were like, all right, I want to come home. I want to have an opportunity to play in front of my family, all that stuff. It's just so many things that go into the decisions. And of course, money. That's one of them as well. I think that you have to look at the entirety of this portal class, which is currently ranked. I know we're going to talk about, how they did, but it's ranked in the top 25 as far as portal class goes for 2026. You have to sit up here and say that Jason Semore ain't got no excuses. It was clear what the goal was and going to this portal, and that was to solidify this front on the defense side of the football.
Yeah, you talked about the line of scrimmage that certainly saw some, eye-catching additions that make you go, okay, I feel good about the direction of where this thing is headed. I look at the secondary where you are able to go get a guy that we talked about on a previous episode this week, Jonas Declona, out of South Florida, who adds experience to this roster. Of course, we talked about Jalen Mbakwe, what he is going to be able to bring in experience to that room. But then you got to think Jason Semore also gets to benefit from the recruiting class that was brought in of Jaden Terry, of Travis Stevenson, being able to get those important Keelan Jones, another one of those guys as well, that in that secondary room, I think there is enough raw talent youth that can then learn from the more experienced guys that they brought in, like Declona. But it's just, I think I said this on a previous episode this past week, Jarvis, where as this team is starting to get put together, especially based on Jason Semore and what he's been able to do at other programs, bringing in the talent that they've been able to bring in, I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable about this defense than I do the offense, just because it feels like there are fewer question marks, and that hasn't been the case, for a couple seasons, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I think that when you think about the competition that's going to happen on the defensive side of the football, like we see the guys that they brought in on the offensive line, Markel Samuels and some of those guys, and those guys are more likely going to compete for starting spots, or more than likely be a starter. Definitely Joseph Ayanata. I feel like he's going to be a starter. You got your two centers walk out the door, hop in the portal. Yeah, he's more likely going to be your guy coming from Alabama. So that's all well and good. But when you think about all the bodies that they brought in on the defensive line, like all of those guys are coming in fully understanding what they're getting themselves into. You got Noah Carter, Tajay McCoy, Tim Griffin, like I mentioned earlier, Jordan Walker, all these guys are saying, man, Tawfiq Thomas, all these guys are coming in to compete, man. And when you talk about the young safeties, Tay Harris and Phoenix Felton, those guys back there, and you think about all of those guys being just thrown in a pot and saying, all right, guys, I'll come see who comes out, who come out shining. And when you have that type of competition, not only in the spring, but definitely in the spring, for sure. It's going to be summertime is a little different. Spring practice, it's just figuring it out, learn to play.
We're excited to be back.
You know what I'm saying? We're excited to be back. We're implementing things. But man, summer camp, we're going to find out who's who. When it's 90 something degrees outside and you got to be out, but these guys, these Power 4 schools, they got indoor practice facilities, and they may or may not go outside. They might stay inside and practice.
Hey,
every
John,
now and then, what I'm saying?
Look, Georgia Tech, they leave the garage doors open. They're exposed to the elements. Now there is air conditioning, but
there is that. But seriously though, in this training camp is much different than spring practice. Like spring practice is glorified skelly, 7-on-7 essentially for the most part. I will be very interested to see all of these guys getting themselves, they get ramped up in spring. You get a good feel for like who's going to be doing what and all that stuff, and schemes and systems and all implementation, all that stuff going to go down in the spring. Because once summer camp starts, it's on. And I think the defensive side of football might have a little head start on the offense because of it's just so many guys are going to be competing for snaps, and like competition breeds greatness in my eyes. That's always been true.
All right, Jarvis, so let's take a look overall. How did the Yellow Jackets do in the transfer portal so far? We've come to the end of the week when the transfer portal closes. Now, no, this does not mean that every player has already decided or has to decide where they're going to play college football this upcoming year. It just means if you were going to put yourself amongst those names, you would have had to do it by now. However, as Jarvis and I have talked in this episode and previous episodes, like the best talent, you have an idea where all of those guys have certainly landed. There's going to be a few who are still weighing their options that the Yellow Jackets are going to go after, and we'll talk about them when that certainly happens. But from an overall view, how do you feel like, Jarvis, that Georgia Tech did in this transfer portal?
I think Key has built up my trust for sure. Because here's the thing. When you talk about all the holes that you had, and I prioritize offensive and defensive linemen for all the people saying, we ain't got a quarterback. I don't care. If you have a formidable offensive line and you got a defensive line room full of guys that just want to get after it, you can figure all that other stuff out. I know the quarterback is the most important position on the field and blah, 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 blah. But oh my goodness. But if you got some people who can't be brought home to mama up front, you can do some things. You can do a lot of things. You can have a lot of success because when you have a new offensive coordinator come in, I even talked about this when the news broke. Check that out, by the way. Previous episode, make sure you catch everything because you might miss some, But I talked about how having those guys up front and bringing in a talent like Haynes and combining him with a guy like Malachi Hosley, that makes everybody's life easier. It makes everyone from quarterback to offensive coordinator, even the head coach, because there can be times where you can be in the game and things get close and things get a little tight, offense struggling, and you can just turn around and hand that bad boy off and break it for about 20 yards plus, or take it to the house. Man, that can be the difference. And we've seen it. We've seen it with Haynes King. Yeah. There were times where this offense was struggling, and it just seems like Buster just said, you know what, man, we're just going to put the ball in 10 hands and we're just going to roll like that. And you end up coming out with a win. So I think being that he prioritized the offensive and defensive line in this class, I feel like my trust meter is up with Brent right now.
I'm definitely confident in what Brent Key was able to do, especially entering the portal, quite honestly, and seeing all of the holes that popped up because of guys that were leaving the program, a lot of them going down to Florida. And, you're having to figure out of like, okay, how are you going to replace?
You look shaky for a little bit, Caleb.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like I was
a little shaky.
I was like, Jarvis, I don't know what kind of team they're going to field in 2026 when this portal first opened. Mm-hmm. Now, clearly, that's where Brent Key makes his money, of going along and figuring all of these things out. Bit too. Yeah. I will say this. I'd feel a lot better about this roster if I had a clearer picture of the wide receiver position on this team.
That's fair.
Because I'm with you on the guys that you brought in could have brought in at quarterback potentially could be better than what you've got in the room. But if you feel confident in what you've got in the room, I am willing to see a year of development at quarterback, dependent upon how those other guys that you had in for visits, how they look. Because like, after all, you got to trust these guys to be the talent evaluators over you and I. But I will say this. The wide receiver position is one where like it's just thin. It's just thin. Can they fix that before April?
And unproven.
Can they fix that before April when the spring game happens? Can they fix that before August when the season gets underway? They absolutely can. It's just like as of January 16th, I like what they did. I'm a little greedy, Jarvis. Like, I just wish a little bit more, You mentioned the ranking earlier. They are 25th according to 24/7 Sports ranking in the transfer portal. And I look at other ACC schools and I go like, Cal is at 15. Louisville's at 14. Virginia Tech's at 12. Like, I don't expect to be in the Virginia Tech category just because I think James Franklin, new program. There's going to be a level of excitement that Brent Key can't create that buzz, pun intended. But the Cals and the Louisvilles, I'm like, 10 spots separate you guys? Like,
got a pretty nice quarterback. They upset a couple people towards the end of the year, so it happens.
Yeah, that's the only thing I think that I get to, Jarvis, is wondering within your own conference of like, okay, sure, you're up top 25, it's great. I just get greedy and want a little bit more, but then you see the names that are out there like Houston's David the Duckway. I'm terrible.
Probably Dukeway.
Dukeway. Okay.
Yeah, Dukeway, yep.
That he got his extension waiver approved to be able to play this upcoming season. So, to your point of improving the lines of scrimmage, hey, you go add another 6'6", 325-pound guy. I'm gonna feel a lot better about this line of scrimmage.
And they said that he got 10 starts at tackle. That young man is going to play guard. I can bet that right now. And that's not insider information. That is Jarvis eyeballs.
Yeah.
That man is going to play guard. Trust me. That man is going to play guard.
Guess who needs a guard?
Yes.
A couple.
The Yellow Jackets. Yes. They need 2 of them, actually. No shade towards the guys on the depth chart, but just saying,
yes.
when you're talking about just practical. Looking at this thing, if they're able to get that young big man up in the office down on the flats and get him whatever price he whatever he wants, give him, got a little change, got a little spare change if he wants that. I'm sure he does. And go and close that deal out. And I think that again, that will go back to foundation. The foundation of this offense is running the football. And I'm totally fine with that because there's been an initiative to solidify both fronts. And I think Key has done a pretty good job of doing it.
I think of, look at your favorite NFL team. A lot of the successful ones build from the inside out. Then you have the flashy teams that
like Falcons. Wow. Pew, pew. My bad.
You have other teams that decide to go real flashy and get the receivers and the running backs and the quarterbacks, seeing the emphasis that Brent Key has put on the lines of scrimmage, I think has got to make you feel good about the future of this program. Jarvis, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts for free. Follow the show on social media at Locked On Georgia Tech. Jarvis is at JarvisD90. I'm at ATL Johnson 18. Thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Georgia Tech with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedongeorgiatech.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. For Locked On Georgia Tech, y'all have a good one.